Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the general pattern of results in the local elections now that we've got a good idea of where it's going, and with a couple of very interesting individual ones as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, oh my goodness, there's been some tasty little results. I suppose we should begin by closing a chapter actually. UKIP have no councillors left. They have been left completely purposeless ever since Brexit. Of course, I've no real idea why they're still clinging on. It was clear that their brains had jumped ship to what was at first the Brexit Party and now Reform UK, but limp on they did, and their last remaining councillors have now been completely wiped out. They no longer have any elected politicians anywhere in the country. But the main news, of course, is the pincer movement of Labour, the Lib Dems and the Green Party against the Conservatives. At the end of the video, I'm going to tell you about a real good pincer movement. But let's go through. So before I get on to Sunak's moment of panic from this morning, I think the award for the bravest face has to go to Johnny Mercer. Not the worst Tory MP by any stretch, so there may be some who've got a bit of sympathy for him. Not really sure I've got too much sympathy for any Tory MPs myself, however. But he had to give an interview after his council of Plymouth lost 8 of the 9 Tory councillors that were standing this year. They weren't all standing. Labour gained control of the council. Mercer was left saying that his party needed to learn and go again tomorrow. I mean, that's all you can say, isn't it? At least he's alluding to the fact there are lessons to learn, meaning that mistakes were made. This was not the pitch from Rishi Sunak. He made a statement very early on in the proceedings, presumably to stop his opponents, including in his own party, maybe especially in his own party, stealing the narrative. Sunak said that the results show that people wanted him to keep doing what he was already doing, focus on the priorities and all that. Mate, their priorities are public services and the cost of living. In fact, very helpfully, the Office for National Statistics published a poll of what people thought were the most important issues. Cost of living, the NHS, the economy, climate change, the cost of food, the cost of energy, their health. Small boats not in there. What Sunak is saying here is that he has no intention of doing anything differently. My priority is not to learn lessons. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to go down well with former Conservative voters who either stayed at home or voted for some bugger else out of frustration with the government. Because that's what Sunak was saying. I intend to learn no lessons. Privately, they must. They must accept that their culture wars aren't working. Their voter suppression may have. More about that in the stream tomorrow, I suspect. But the culture wars are not working. There were some Conservative gains, of course, individual ones. Bear in mind that the Conservatives lost a lot of seats and councils in 2019, largely as a result of the utter chaos that was Theresa May and her government. You know, she was in complete freefall, as was the party. So some of those voters who stayed away in 2019 or voted for someone else, they were always going to return when the party looked like it was vaguely sensible, or at least on an even keel. It doesn't matter that the country's in an even worse state. These are Tory voters. They were only upset in 2019 because they didn't want to vote for the absolute mess that the party represented at the time. But these gains, though baffling when you look at the state of the country, were inevitable. It's just how some people are. But they did little to stem the tide of net losses. The small boat's just not doing it. And nowhere was this message spoken more loudly than in Medway in Kent. This is small boat central. It's Nigel Farage's stomping grounds. Medway is one of the areas most vulnerable to the propaganda about asylum and channel crossings. Yet the Conservatives lost 13 council seats and Labour gained 11, taking control of the whole council into the bargain. This council had been in Conservative control for 20 years, and it didn't just flip from Conservative to no overall control, because that's usually what happens. You lose a few councillors and you lose control, but no one, there needs to be a coalition. No, this was fully flipping from Conservative to Labour control. This is the reason why you may see people making such a fuss over this particular council. It's been solidly conservative for 2 decades. This isn't one of the ones that fell with the red wall collapse of 2019. No, this has been solidly conservative for 2 decades. It's a prime target for the culture wars, and yet Labour still comfortably flipped it. The Conservatives and Labour, of course, are both engaged in expectation management, or they were ahead of the election. Labour was saying, oh, net gain of 400, that'd be nice, that'd be a good night, won't it? Meaning, of course, they expect to get much more. The Conservatives claimed they were on for losing 1,000 seats, meaning they expected to lose way fewer. But at the moment, you know, people are wondering if they might not get there. The Tories cannot claim victory if they lose 1,000 seats. If they're saying that's their expectation, first of all, that's a bit of a loser expectation. But if they lose 1,000 seats, it's like, well, you didn't really add any value in your campaign, did you? If they lose more than 1,000, they cannot claim anything other than defeat. The thing with expectation management is that you will claim you will get a worse result than you expect so that you can claim victory. That's how it works. Now, I will say that at the time of recording, there are still a lot of councils and seats still to declare. I can't do a proper full roundup until the stream tomorrow evening, so I don't know whether the Conservatives will keep their losses below 1,000, but if they do, the way it's looking at the moment, I'm not sure it's going to be by much. And if they did mess up their expectation management, that is quite bad for them. Not just in terms of losing control of the narrative, but it suggests that your strategists messed up. And if they can mess up in one election, they can mess up in another. So we'll wait for the final result, you know, which, as I say, I'll discuss tomorrow. But if the Tories have misjudged this one, expect pressure on Sunak to at least change his strategies. And although Sunak may have been getting his statement out early today to scatter the vultures, Keir Starmer was only too eager to make statements early on as well. I noted that he said that we can now go on to change the country. He said to cut the cost of living, cut waiting lists and cut crime. And I'm thinking, I wonder if that's going to be part of the slogan for the next election. Because you can see it working, can't you? You could say, after 14 years, people are sick of these Tory cuts. The cuts to living standards, the cuts to public services, the cuts to opportunities for our children. The only cuts people are interested in are cuts to the cost of living, cuts to NHS waiting times, and cuts to crime. That'd work. The main saving grace for the Conservatives is that, unlike in the mid-1990s, when they were getting battered in local elections ahead of the 97 general election, Labour are not the only beneficiaries. Lib Dems, Greens, Independents, they're all cleaning up. So although the Tory performance is absolutely dismal, that the healthy mix of other parties benefiting restricts Labour's gains, that is a little consolation prize for the Tories. Because when it comes to voter perception, in terms of believing that there's going to be a change of government next year, people will look at the Labour results as much as the Tories. Several media outlets are trying to make something of vote share. That's sort of fine. But they're trying to link it to national projections for next year. That's fairly pointless. For a start, only so many parts of the country are taking part in these elections. The dumbest comment I saw was from Hodges of the Mail, saying that the BBC have confirmed that Labour's vote share was less than in 2022. It's like, mate, it was different parts of the country then. In fact, last year was when that was the really strong Labour areas. I said last year, don't expect many net gains because these are the seats that Labour already had. This was the year for the big Labour gains. Labour won 2/3 of all the seats up for grabs last year. It was the major Labour heartlands. This year, they'll be happy with 1/3. 1/3 will be a triumph. It's different areas. Bloody idiot. Of course, vote share is going to be lower. But this is the problem with the Tories controlling so much of the media narrative. That they will even spin the loss of hundreds of seats after 2019 as a win is remarkable. But even they can't spin the loss of 1,000. So we'll have to wait and see. But although Labour have failed to make ground in some areas, there were some where they were hoping to make gains, and there'll need to be a strong showing next year where they didn't. But they have captured some major scalps. Blackpool to Labour, East Staffordshire, North East Derbyshire, where a pissed up Boris Johnson was trying to assure voters that Labour weren't looking good. Swindon, which voted Leave and then destroyed their own economy because it was reliant on the car industry. They've gone Labour. I'm seeing reports that Sunak's opponents are circling. They're trying to make the point that Sunak has to own these results. Can't blame others. He's got to own them because he has been Chancellor and then Prime Minister for the last 3 years. That's his own side saying that, sort of. Oh, and if you want a really big talking point, a couple of very tasty results. Bracknell Forest. I talked about this one in last week's stream. I said, if you're interested in tactical voting, tactical politics, watch Bracknell Forest, Berkshire. There was a suggestion that there was a progressive alliance of sorts, a bit of a pact, or at the very least a non-aggression pact. In 12 of the 15 wards up for grabs, if you think about the three progressive parties operating there, Labour, Lib Dems and Greens, in 12 of those 15 wards, there was only one of those parties represented. They were denying it, but it was clearly looking like they didn't want to tread on each other's toes. And this proper Tory council, proper Tory. Oh, almost every seat was Tory. Not anymore. It's a Labour council now. Labour went from 4 councillors to 22. 4 to 22. That's actually a bit of a worry, because you actually wonder, are they going to be able to run the council? Because they've suddenly got a massive influx of councillors. But from 4 to 22. The Lib Dems go from none to 7. Greens from none to 2. The Tories went from 37 to 10. Boom. Huge result for tactical politics. Huge. And if you want some spice on those chips, Middlesbrough too. Let's look at Middlesbrough. The scene of some very dodgy going on in relation to the Brexit free ports there. Some of you may have seen it in the news. Had a Tory mayor who seemed to be covering for a few things. He's got a Labour mayor now. There was no overall control of the council, although it was, heavily Labour. But now Labour do have control. I think there may be some opening of the books on the Freeport dealings quite soon. What do you think? That could be interesting. And at this point, there are still lots of seats to declare. But I have to say, the overall results look very bad for the Tories and very good for the progressive parties. But there are some cracking individual stories as well. But we can catch up with even more in the stream tomorrow. Check out the homepage for that. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. Until next time, I'll see you later.